We've hit the halfway point in this, our course on configuring group policy. And in this, number 3 of the 4 different objectives, we've got what is probably, I don't know, the least interesting of the information that corresponds to actually dealing with group policy and group policy objects. Now, I say least interesting not because necessarily you should flip to the next module, but in the greater scheme of things, what we'll talk about here in this module is more about the nuts and bolts, the care and feeding of your group policy infrastructure. It is in that next module when we start talking about group policy preferences, which is probably, at least for me, the most interesting of the 4 different modules, where things get really exciting. But before we get into the really cool part about how GPPs can really even eliminate logon scripts and do other kinds of really cool configurations, let's talk here about the everyday administrative tasks that you have to perform when it comes to managing any kind of group policy infrastructure. Here in this module, we've got 4 different topics to discuss, the first being backing up, importing, copying, and restoring GPOs. Just like with anything in IT, making sure that we have a backup copy of those GPOs means that we can restore them should we, for some reason, misconfigure a setting, or the policies should get corrupted for one reason or another. Now, in addition to the usual backup and restore tasks, though, this backup and import and copy part of what we're talking about here in this first task can also be used to transfer group policy objects from one domain or forest to another. And that process can actually be pretty useful if you have multiple different domains that you have to deal with, because this really is, at least with the tools that we have in hand, probably the best way to go about transferring that idea, that object that is a group policy object, out to some other location. We will talk about the different ways in which you can import and export GPOs. We will also talk about the use of what is called a migration table. Now, anytime you're dealing with a GPO that has to be transferred from one domain or forest to another, you probably can imagine that there will be some connections, some links, some domain-specific values in that GPO that should probably be reconfigured to support the servers and domain names and other things that correspond with a target domain. Well, you can make use of a migration table to create a essentially before and after snapshot of what those values should be. We'll take a look at the migration table, which is it's built right into the group policy management console, and talk about how you can actually take a group policy object and move it from one location to the other with the use of such a migration table. Down here for number 3, we'll talk about resetting the default GPOs, which is literally just 2 different commands I want to show you, the DC GPO fix command and the GP fixup command. Both of these come in handy when you just fat finger something and inadvertently destroy or misconfigure or otherwise corrupt the default GPOs for a domain. And then lastly, we have one more very quick topic here. This whole module will be relatively short, but this last quick topic here involves the delegation activity, which allows you to provide the access, the permissions and the rights and so on, so that other administrators can perform the various tasks in group policy management. Here inside of the Group Policy Management console, there's a pretty well-designed interface for delegating out group policy management. The ease at which you can delegate management here in group policy kind of stands in contrast to the challenge in doing the same things over in Active Directory users and computers. So I think you'll appreciate what we'll see here in terms of how you can identify the different tasks that are necessary and provide access to perform those tasks to different users and groups here in your domain.